Good morning, everyone. Today, we delve into the extraordinary life of Ludwig van Beethoven, a man we know as the Saint of Music. We revere his thunderous symphonies, yet we often forget that his most transcendent works were born in a perfect vacuum of sound. This is the story of how a deaf man learned to hear the universe and became the man who met God in silence. Imagine a painter without eyes or a chef without a sense of taste. Now, consider the reality of Ludwig van Beethoven. For a composer, deafness is not just a medical condition, it is a social death sentence. It is the precise removal of the one sense required to justify his very existence. This, my friends, is the cruel paradox of his life. In his 20s, Beethoven was, without a doubt, the king of Vienna. He was a virtuoso improviser who conquered the city with his unparalleled talent at the piano. He possessed immense confidence, growing fame, and considerable wealth. The world was loud with applause, and he held it all in the palm of his hand. Then, at the age of 26, a foul visitor arrived. It started innocuously enough, like a buzzing insect in his ear, a relentless tinnitus. Slowly, high frequencies vanished. Human speech dissolved into an incomprehensible mumble. The very sounds of the world, his world, began to warp into an unbearable noise. He famously lamented, "A jealous demon has taken up residence in my ears." To admit deafness was professional suicide for a composer. So, he hid his condition, retreating into solitude to avoid the humiliation of having to say, "I cannot hear you." The world, in its ignorance, labeled him an arrogant genius or a misanthrope. But the key insight here is that, in reality, he was a terrified patient, living in constant fear of discovery, desperately trying to maintain his professional life. In the autumn of 1802, Beethoven retreated to the quiet village of Heiligenstadt on a doctor's orders, seeking a cure. There, he was forced to face the cold, unyielding medical truth: his hearing would never return. The silence, he realized, was permanent. This devastating realization stripped away his last defense, leaving him utterly vulnerable. It was during this harrowing period that he penned a letter to his brothers, now known as the Heiligenstadt Testament. In it, he confessed to profound despair and even suicidal impulses. He wrote, "When someone near me hears a flute in the distance and I hear nothing. What humiliation! I was on the verge of ending my life." At just 32 years old, he stood at the precipice of death, contemplating his very existence. So, why did he put down the pen and step back from the ledge? He answered that question himself: "Only art held me back. I could not leave the world until I had brought forth all that I felt was within me." He chose not to succumb, but to embrace a resurrection. He resolved that if his physical ears were closed, he would listen with his soul, creating music from within. As total deafness set in, the external world went mute, but his internal universe paradoxically expanded. In this perfect vacuum, he began to compose music no ear had ever heard. He devised ingenious methods to connect with sound. For bone conduction, he sawed the legs off his piano and pressed his ear to the floor, or he'd bite a wooden stick attached to the instrument to feel the vibrations in his skull. To communicate with visitors, he relied solely on written notes, known as conversation books. Then, on May 7, 1824, decades of silence culminated in the premiere of his Ninth Symphony. It was revolutionary, marking the first time a chorus was introduced into a symphony. A deaf man, Beethoven himself, stood on the podium to beat the time, while the orchestra, captivated and awed, followed his every movement. It was an impossible symphony, brought to life by an impossible conductor. As the final chord of the Ode to Joy crashed down, the hall erupted. Thunderous applause, shouts, and stamping feet shook the very floor. But Beethoven heard nothing. He stood with his back to the crowd, still staring at the orchestra, completely unaware that he had just conquered the world with his masterpiece. It was the alto singer, Caroline Unger, who approached the maestro and gently turned him around. He didn't hear the applause, he saw it. He saw the waving handkerchiefs, the hats flying through the air, and the tear-streaked faces of the audience. In that profound moment, the tragedy of his deafness was redeemed. He confirmed his victory not through his ears, but through his eyes, witnessing the overwhelming impact of his music. This brings us to a profound truth: durch Leiden zur Freude, or, through suffering to joy. It's a compelling thought. If he had not lost his hearing, we might never have received his greatest works. His disability, rather than a hindrance, became the fuel for his unparalleled creativity. By blocking out the world's distractions, he accessed the deepest vibrations of the human soul. Pain, in his case, was not a barrier to art, it was often its most potent source. So, what is your silence? Do you face a deafness of your own, a weakness, a failure, or a barrier that seems insurmountable, threatening to end your career or aspirations? Take a lesson from Beethoven. Close your ears to the noise of despair. Like him, your greatest masterpiece may be waiting in the silence of your deepest struggle. As Beethoven himself wisely said, adversity is a stepping stone for the great. Beethoven's music was written in a silent room, but it was destined to echo through the stars and across the ages. When the world around you goes dark, remember to listen to the music inside. That, my friends, is where the light truly begins.